market said today that its trading profit fell 14.3% to 6.8 billion rand. That's about $442.6 million in the year to end June. Coming up on the show tonight. Sudan Opposition Alliance nominates economist Abdalla Hamdok as Prime Minister. China's tech giant Huawei rejects spying allegations in Uganda and Zambia. And this former banker is making organic farming attractive to young people in Nigeria. We begin in Zimbabwe. The government is planning to award its civil servants a pay increase. However, the country has been warned against committing beyond its means. The International Monetary Fund has urged Zimbabwe to reject its pay boost plan unless it has a sufficient tax revenue to do so. From Harare, here's CGTN's Faremo Kutuya.
Civil servants want the value of their October 2018 salaries restored. Now, back then, the local currency and US dollars were at par. They say that the rapid depreciation of the local unit since then has eroded their wages and left them incapacitated. Now, if their demands are to be met, that could mean a tenfold increment, something that government, in trying to appease the workers, has been cautioned not to do.
Our local currency is so far depreciated 9 times thereabouts. So it doesn't follow that the government should increase salaries 9 times. Because if you increase salaries 9 times, this will lead to an increase in the prices, which will call for another round of increase in salaries, which will call for another round of increase in prices.
Apart from spawning a wage price spiral that could also cause a fallout with the International Monetary Fund, which has so far backed a raft of economic reforms. With pressure mounting from workers and the threat of more protests on one hand, and the risk of jeopardizing an IMF staff-monitored program on the other, Treasury has some tough decisions to make. Faremo Kutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
In Uganda, taxpayers are protesting the planned move by the government to tax workers' retirement benefits. The proposed amendments contained in the National Social Security Bill will allow the government to tax the money workers receive when they retire, as opposed to the current law, which taxes the contributions they make while they're still working. It's just one proposal in the bill that's raising criticism from members of the public. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Michael Kabuka is a contributor to the Workers' Pension Scheme, also known as the National Social Security Fund. He's been serving with the scheme for 10 years now. Kabuka is concerned that the tax on his savings could be hiked under the proposed amendments.
The question is, how much tax will I pay when I am actually getting the benefit? Because I get it as a lump sum, we're not sure, is it at what rate? It would be at 40%, which is the highest rate, because imagine if I get 1 million now and I get, say, 10 million or 20 million afterwards when I'm retiring, that should be subject to tax. But is it at the tax rate of 40%, 30% or 20%?
Kabuka and others want the proposed amendments to focus on taxing annual interest rather than taxing the benefit. The current law was enacted in 1985. But the government believes it no longer adequately represents the best interests of taxpayers. It says the proposed amendment will help eliminate double taxation.
Instead of having 2 places where the funds are being taxed, let's have the funds being taxed at the very end so that it allows the fund to invest more, it allows the individual to have a bigger take-home pay, and also it allows the government to collect more taxes, but also the member to get a bigger social security balance when they retire.
The proposed amendments also compel all workers in formal employment to contribute to the fund. Government figures show that the country has 19 million workers, and out of this, only 5 million contribute to the fund. Under the proposed amendments, the government is also seeking to borrow directly from the fund, a concern to some opposition lawmakers.
Government is actually borrowing. It is the biggest borrower from the fund. Why are they now seeking to provide for direct borrowing? Do they want to borrow it at an interest rate which is lower than the treasury bill? And that would be dangerous.
The government argues more people saving will widen the country's tax base, and taxpayers like Kabuka could walk away with a bigger paycheck upon retirement. Parliament will vote on the proposals in the coming weeks. Hilara Isga, CGTN, Kampala.
Sudan's main opposition alliance has nominated Abdalla Hamdok as Prime Minister in the country's transitional government. Hamdok is an economist who has served in various international institutions. The nomination is the first step towards the creation of a transitional government, which will prepare for free elections after the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir in April. So who exactly is Abdalla Hamdok? CGTN's Robert Nagila tells us more.
Up until Abdalla Hamdok was proposed for position of Prime Minister, little was known about him.
Your Excellency,
Hamdok has over 3 decades of experience in the public and private sectors in administration and policy. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Khartoum and a PhD degree from the School of Economic Studies, University of Manchester. Between 1981 and 1987, he worked as a senior official at the Finance Ministry in Sudan. From 1993 to 1995, he was the head of public sector group at Deloitte & Touche Management Consultants in Zimbabwe. From 1995 to 1997, he was the chief technical officer at the International Labour Organization. In 1997, he joined the African Development Bank as a principal policy economist, a post he held until 2001. He then worked briefly for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in 2001 and in 2002 as Director of Regional Integration and Trade. Between 2011 to October 2018, he was the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECA.
I thank you for your
Robert Nagela, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Ambassador Ahmed Haggag served in Sudan for 8 years. He was Assistant Foreign Minister for Sudan Affairs and advisor to the Minister of Economy for Sudan. He joins us live from Cairo for further discussion on this. Ambassador Haggag, thank you for joining us. Now, the new Prime Minister Hamdok is a well-known economist. He has held several leadership posts within Sudan and Africa. Is he the right man for the job, and what is he bringing to the table?
I think the new Prime Minister of Sudan is a prominent economic figure in Africa and in his country. He served, as you mentioned, in the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and the African Development Bank. And he has, but he will face a heavy burden because the economy has been neglected for almost 3 decades. The infrastructure is not well developed, and the finances are almost depleted, and the external debt is high. So he needs all the sympathy and support from the friends of Sudan, either in Africa or abroad in the International Monetary Fund, in the World Bank. But I think he will be able to lift the standard of living of the Sudanese people who have been deprived of many commodities, petrol, and basic necessities. The economic challenge is the biggest challenge, and I hope he will concentrate on this challenge because the Sudanese people are waiting for somebody who is going to reform the economy, reform the administration, try to put an end to high level of corruption and greed. So he needs all, as I mentioned before, the support, not by mere words, but by financial help to lift Sudan from its dire situation at present.
So he is taking over at a time Sudan is going through several challenges. You have mentioned the economic meltdown. There is conflict in Darfur, South Kordofan, the Blue Nile area. There's got issues of corruption, like you mentioned. And let's not also forget the sanctions imposed on Sudan by the United States, which is critical to that country. So what should the new Prime Minister prioritize, and why?
As I hope Mr. Hamdan will try to focus the attention on lifting the agriculture in Sudan. Sudan is very rich in mineral resources and agricultural land, and they have the water, the rain, and also trained people. I hope he can be able to put them in eminent position in his government. And but parallel to that, he has to give some attention to the conflict situation in other parts of the country, in the Darfur region, or the other region in the border issues. Sudan is a huge country. It needs a lot of reform and support, and but I think they will be managing in 3 or 4 years with international and regional support from the United Nations Commission for Africa, or from the African Development Bank, or the World Bank itself. He has to foster relations, good relations with neighboring countries, try to put the Sudanese economy in the African economic stream in the African Union. And Sudan has to, as I mentioned, to concentrate on the agriculture sector, try to specialize in agriculture business for export either to neighboring countries or the outside world.
So the Prime Minister is expected to be in power for 3 years before Sudan heads to elections, and there is a lot of expectations from Sudanese. 3 years, Ambassador, is that enough time for him to deliver on all of these expectations?
Yes, 3 years is a very short time in order to lift the economic situation in Sudan. He has to pay attention to the political situation in the country. There will be some people who try to hinder his policies, but I think he has the support of the African Union, the neighboring countries, and the majority of the Sudanese people. So I think the international fora has to come to a risk-free package, either by the World Bank or the European Union or the Arab world. He got some initial support from the Arab world by Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, but I think Africa has to lend more support to his position, and let us hope that he will succeed. And I am glad that one of his main issues is to curtail. He will not be able to abolish corruption or greed. And I'm glad that his cabinet will be not more than 20 ministers, which is a good record in African government. So I think he needs the best wishes from the Sudanese people, from his colleagues at the ministerial level, and also from the military. Military is still very important, and he has to work with them in order to proceed with his program.
All right, Ambassador Ahmed Hagag, thank you for your time. Up next, we're looking at your corporate headlines. Egyptian lender Banque du Caire says it will hold an initial public offering by the end of 2019 or early next year. Banque du Caire, which is the third biggest state-owned bank in Egypt, is expected to offer around 30 to 40% of its shares. This is as it aims to raise between $300 to $400 million from the IPO. South African retail giant Shoprite has posted a 19.6% decrease in its basic earnings per share for the year ended in June. The company's profit for the period fell by 18.2% to stand at about $273 million. Shoprite has attributed its latest decline to inventory shortages in South Africa, as well as currency devaluations across the continent. Staying in South Africa, state-owned arms maker Denel has been ordered to pay unemployment insurance and the taxes deducted from employees' salaries. Last month, South Africa's Solidarity Union sued Denel, accusing it of failing to hand over the taxes it deducted from its employees to the South African Revenue Service and other bodies. And finally, the Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria has entered into partnership with Google. The move is aimed at providing quality digital skills training for micro, small and medium enterprises in the West African nation. It's in line with a practice that's set to link the communication gap between MSMEs and the global marketplace. And that's a look at your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business, coming up after the break. South Africa lays out its long-term plans for nuclear power. And Africa's largest wind farm is now operational in Kenya.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan. Hello, Naro.
This is how whole stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business. The South African government says it will not adopt a big bang approach to building new nuclear power capacity. Instead, the country says it will add its capacity in an affordable way as part of its long-term plans. South Africa is at the moment operating Africa's only one nuclear power plant as it looks to extend the facility's life by 20 years. But according to experts, a large-scale nuclear new build is something South Africa cannot afford. Former South African President Jacob Zuma was a massive champion for a nuclear expansion project with Russia. But upon taking office in 2017, his successor, Cyril Ramaphosa, put those plans on hold.
If life of Cuba come to an end in 2024, and there is a plan to extend its life by 20 years, you cannot replace that capacity at 0.20 years. If you want to do that, you use the modular process. You are giving you space to develop that additional capacity over a period of time, rather than plunging into a huge nuclear a build program at once. I was saying, Quebec capacity will have to be replaced. Not necessarily by nuclear, by the way. It can be replaced by any capacity. But nuclear has an opportunity to be part of replacing that capacity, because it is not only Quebec capacity that is lost. A number of coal-generated power stations are closed. So that capacity will have to be replaced. So we have got a big responsibility of replacing that energy capacity. So that's why we must look into various options at our disposal.
Angelo Kopla has been following these developments for us. He joins us live now from Johannesburg for more on this. So, Angelo, talk of nuclear power development, that brings to mind huge sums of money. Can South Africa financially afford this? Does it have that financial capacity?
Well, the short answer there is no. The government doesn't have the wherewithal to fund that initial 96 gigawatts of nuclear power in terms of that power plant plan that was being mooted by Mr. Zuma and his erstwhile energy minister, that was Jomart Peterson. That Big Bang approach is history, thankfully, according to what we heard today. That's because taxpayers are already stretched to the limit, and there's likely to be a shortfall when it comes to the next budget speech in Parliament in February next year. And that's according to the Finance Minister, Tito Mboweni. There was also in fact, there are other priorities that the government has to look after, like funding, for example, the government guarantee for Eskom, which runs into hundreds of millions of dollars. And let's not forget the social welfare program that the government has embarked on since 1994. And of course, just last week we heard about the National Health Insurance Program, which is also likely to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's going to see the light in 5 to 10 years' time, which kind of coincides with a nuclear build modular program that is being presented at the moment, Peninah.
All right, so these were plans, Angelo, that Jacob Zuma had of a massive nuclear power project, and then comes Cyril Ramaphosa and he put that on hold. So why is it coming up now?
Well, we heard from Minister Mantashe today that there was also probably another reason that the plan was put on hold, and that's because, according to Mantashe, there were rumor and allegations around corruption surrounding that initial Big Bang nuclear plan. Nothing has, of course, been proven in this regard to date. It's coming up now also because Mantashe is pushing the IRP, which is the Integrated Resource Plan. That's for energy in the country. It provides details behind the government's thinking, as well as an implementation plan for those energy needs that we have to meet. It's been delayed for several years now for no apparent reason. And the backstory here is that Mantashe has developed a bit of a reputation for being an action-oriented minister, somebody who wants to get the job done. And that became quite apparent when Mantashe took over from his disgraced predecessor, one Mosebenzi Zwane, and within months managed to get the Minerals Council to agree on a mining charter that would work for both sides. Of course, there are some issues still outstanding there, but after a 2.5-year hiatus, he managed to move quite quickly within about 3 months. So he's an action-orientated minister, and that's probably what's driving this process at the moment, Peninah.
All right, so we know that South Africa wants to supplement its power capacity. Is the government looking to invest in other power sources, cleaner power sources such as wind and solar?
Well, look, the government hasn't got directly involved in the renewable sector just yet, but the IRP is likely to create a state-owned renewables business. It was being proposed and touted a couple of years ago, and then it got very quiet and nothing came of it. But the business will compete, if it does happen, with the private sector, and that's raised some questions around unfair competition. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But the challenge facing the renewables sector on the private sector side is that the previous energy minister rushed the approval of the last round of renewables through, and suppliers have Eskom over a barrel at the moment in terms of pricing, something that apparently is irking the energy department. The renewables suppliers had managed to negotiate prices that are higher than Eskom can actually charge its clients for electricity, which of course is going to place extra pressure on the Eskom bottom line, and we know how tight that bottom line is at the moment. And that's something that the taxpayers in the country don't really need at this particular time. Peninah.
All right, Angelo, thank you for that update. Angelo Kupla live there in Johannesburg. Now, the largest wind farm on the African continent is operational in Kenya. The Lake Turkana Wind Power Farm's 365 turbines can dispense 310 megawatts to Kenya's national grid. The project aims to boost Kenya's electricity supply by 13% and help lower electricity costs for Kenyan consumers. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has more.
Africa's largest wind power plant was launched in Kenya in June 2019. The plant on the shores of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya aims at reducing electricity costs and dependence on fossil fuels. It is expected to move the nation towards meeting its ambitious goal of 100% green energy by next year.
Since 24th of September to date, we have now produced power that has saved the Kenyan consumer 8.5 billion shillings in fuel cost adjustments that would otherwise have been loaded onto the consumer tariff.
About 70% of the nation's electricity is generated from renewable sources such as hydropower and geothermal, more than 3 times the global average. But 1 in 4 Kenyans, mostly in rural areas, does not have access to electricity. Those with power face high costs and frequent blackouts due to unreliable supplies. The sprawling wind farm has been designed to boost the nation's electricity supply by 13% and help lower costs for Kenyan consumers.
During the day, we produce between 15 and 17% of Kenya's power. That is at peak demand. And at off-peak during the night, we produce up to 30% of Kenya's power.
Kenya has made great strides in renewable energy in recent years and is considered to be one of the few African nations making progress towards clean power. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Maternity leave for women in Ethiopia is being extended to 120 days from the previous 90 days. The new allowance applies to women in formal employment. The government says a recent revision of its labor law is designed in line with the country's economic growth, development policies and strategies along with industrial development. As CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports.
Settling into motherhood was tough for Ida Million, who had a job when she had her 2 children. She says the 90 days paid maternity leave was too short.
I felt like I was abusing my baby because I was only breastfeeding. I didn't give any bottles and things like that. So it was kind of like, like most of the time I'm worried and I just want to go back to home, to my child.
But Ethiopia's parliament has revised the labor law to give female employees 1 month of prenatal leave and 3 months after the baby arrives.
For the woman, I think the most important thing at that time is to be like taking care of her child. And for the job, I mean, like you can come back with more energy and feeling like you missed work and things like that. So I don't think it will affect her productivity because she'll miss her job. She'll you'll be excited to go out, but at the same time she'll be more productive at home and she'll be more happy to come back.
Ida's employer says if implemented well, the law in the long run will produce contented and productive female workers.
Given the fact that we have millions of young women coming into the workforce, and given the fact that we're slowly but surely becoming an industrial nation, especially in terms of first steps in textile and apparel and all of that, I think it's imperative that you look after 50% of your population. So I think it's long overdue.
However, he believes not all employers will understand the benefits. Many women are employed in Ethiopia's industrial parks, and some factories may not be able to afford to have their employees away for so long. And there is fear some businesses may be wary of employing pregnant or unmarried women.
It will take time for businesses to adjust. I think government might have to step in and offer some sort of incentives, whether tax or whatever it may be, until we have a social security system where that social security system would be able to adapt and be able to pay for this time off.
According to the International Labour Organization, over 800 million working women worldwide are being deprived of adequate maternity leave. 80% of these women live in Africa and Asia.
In Africa, most countries allow 90 days for maternity leave.
But even in the few countries where women are entitled to 120 days, enforcement is weak.
Ethiopia's new law doesn't yet cater for women employed in the informal sector, which is the majority. But while Ida may not benefit from the new extension of maternity leave, she says she is glad her colleagues walking into motherhood will. Colette Joy, CGTN, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. China's tech giant Huawei rejects spying allegations in Uganda and Zambia. And US tech firms resist France's new digital tax.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant.
Only on CGTN.
For lucrative economic data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
From Nairobi's city center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Accra is my kind of city. That's because when I'm here, I feel like I'm back home in Lagos or Abidjan, which are two of the major cities I grew up in.
Business in Africa is
After about a decade covering business news on the continent, I've learned it's all about the high risk, but also the high returns and the high energy. You simply have to adjust in order to keep pace. When I started out as a journalist, my dream was to open people's minds to the different perspectives. From the CEO in the boardroom to the trader out in the street, we all have different stories. From Accra to Addis Ababa, from Cairo to Cape Town, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Here at CGTN, we realize that Africa is on the move, and it's moving fast, but we're moving right along with it. I'm Ucheo Koronkwo, and I'm a business anchor and reporter at CGTN.
Let's look at the top stories of the day. In Burkina Faso, unidentified militants have attacked an army unit in the northern part of the country. According to the military, 24 soldiers were killed in the attack, updating its previous death toll of 10. The attack is reported to have occurred in the early hours of Monday morning in Kotougou in the South Province. Sudan's main opposition alliance has nominated Abdalla Hamdok as Prime Minister in the country's transitional government. Hamdok is an economist who has served in various international institutions. The nomination is the first step towards the creation of a transitional government, which will prepare for free elections after the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir in April. And Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam says the government is open to dialogue with the public. She says authorities will talk to peaceful protesters and tackle complaints against the police. Lam also expressed hope that the peaceful protest at Victoria Park over the weekend was the start of an effort to restore order. And that's a look at some of the day's top stories. A report by the Wall Street Journal alleging that Huawei staff helped the governments of Uganda and Zambia to spy on people is taking words out of context and is full of loopholes. This is according to the spokesman of Chinese Foreign Ministry, Geng Shuang. Geng says using modern technology to improve the social governance is a common practice around the world and should not be described as spying on political opponents.
I noticed that Huawei has responded to this report as well as the official statements from Uganda and Zambia. A spokesperson of Uganda president said the report by the Wall Street Journal was utterly false. A spokesperson of the Zambian government said the report is malicious and they refuted it with the contempt it deserves. Using modern technology and products to improve social governance is common practice in the international community. Similar technologies and equipment are widely used in the United States. Why should their application in other countries be described as spying on political opponents?
Elsewhere, the U.S. economy appears poised to enter a recession within the next 2 years. This view continues to increase amid a raft of indicators from across the globe. But Donald Trump's administration doesn't agree, as CGTN's Owen Fairclough reports.
It's one of the most contested words being thrown around right now.
Recession.
The recession would be bigger.
I don't see a recession.
Amid a volatile summer for US stock markets, a new survey of economists revealed 38% of them think there will be a recession by next year or the year after. And that pessimism has increased since February. But President Donald Trump doesn't agree.
I don't think we're having a recession. We're doing tremendously well. Our consumers are rich. I gave a tremendous tax cut.
So if the president and Wall Street can't agree, who's right?
Trump is accurate to a degree when he says the US economy is doing well. It is still growing, though at a reduced rate, and unemployment is at record lows. But that's only half the story when world economies are so interdependent, and some of them are in trouble. Germany has Europe's strongest economy, but it's contracting. And the European Central Bank is considering restarting a massive stimulus program to support the entire Eurozone. And the China-US trade war clearly poses a threat to the US economy because Trump just delayed a new round of tariffs so they wouldn't harm consumer spending during the critical holiday season.
And another possible indicator of a looming US recession? Government short-term borrowing costs are higher than those for the long term. That anomaly has happened before every US recession but one in the past 50 years. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Turning to online commerce now, major tech firms are speaking out against the new French tax. The opponents claim the tax is discriminatory. Last month, the French Senate approved a 3% levy on digital service companies that earn more than around $28 million in French revenue and over $800 million worldwide. CGTN's Jim Spellman explains.
Representatives from Amazon, Google, Facebook, and several industry associations testified before the U.S. Trade Representative Monday about France's new digital tax. Amazon says the 3% tax is harmful and discriminatory. The online retail giant responded by increasing the fees third-party sellers based in France pay by a corresponding 3%. The USTR will evaluate the comments from U.S. businesses and make a decision about what they may do in response. When French President Emmanuel Macron signed the new law last month, President Trump threatened to tax French wine in retaliation.
They should not have done it, so I may do that. I've always liked American wines better than French wines, even though I don't drink wine. I just like the way they look, okay? But American wines are great. American wines are great, and they didn't do the right thing when they start taxing our companies.
But French officials say this new tax has nothing to do with targeting American companies. They say the tax is simply intended to create a level playing field for small French companies.
Our American friends should not understand the decision taken by France to have its own national taxation of digital activities as any willingness of targeting the American companies. That's not the case. We are not willing to target the American companies. We are just willing to have a fair and efficient taxation of digital activities.
Later this month at the G7, France will push for a universal digital tax. It's not clear if the U.S. will go along with such a plan. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Washington.
The Russian equivalent to Google, Yandex, says that it is considering the expansion of its fleet of self-driving cars to about 1,000 within the next 2 years. That's to speed up tests of the fledgling automotive technology. Yandex already is testing 35 autonomous cars on the streets of Moscow and hopes to be looking at least 65 more by the end of the year. Here's more on that story.
Dmitry Polyshchuk, the head of Yandex's self-driving car division, told reporters last week that autonomous vehicles were already being used at the Innopolis Tech Hub next to the city of Kazan. HSBC said in a January report that Yandex's autonomous driving software was on a par with global leaders in the technology, and it was catching up with Google's Waymo. Yandex has not disclosed how much it has invested in self-driving technology, but Polyshchuk said a single car cost 6.5 million rubles, or $98,000. He said the price has fallen from the 9.5 million rubles it cost to build the company's first prototype. Yandex began working on driverless technology in 2016 and tested its first cars in 2017. The cars are being tested in Russia's Skolkov and Innopolis tech parks. The firm also obtained a license to test driverless transportation in Israel last year.
We, the team of Yandex, are developing a robot driver. This project kicked off in the beginning of 2017, and it comprises two major components. The first one is so-called hardware, the sensors and computers installed in a car, and the second one, that is algorithms. The algorithms make decisions on how a car should behave on the road based on the data gathered by its sensors.
Polyshchuk said Yandex was looking into the possibility of carrying out tests in the United States, where he said legislation was the most progressive. Song Yatian, CGTN.
Turning to the Chinese auto sector, Chinese NIO and German auto parts supplier Bosch have been collaborating for more than a year on autonomous driving thanks to a deal between both countries. CGTN's Chen Tong looks at how the effort has been working out.
When NIO and Bosch signed their agreement last July, the aim was to expand each company's abilities in sensor technology, autonomous driving, engine control, and intelligent transportation systems.
By cooperating with local players like NIO and all other companies, will provide a lot of data and road situation unique in China to us.
German equipment suppliers have also joined Baidu's autonomous driving plan, Apollo. And China's Tsinghua University has also cooperated with Daimler to set up a research center to study future developments in driving. So while the German firms gain crucial data from China, Chinese firms stand to gain too.
Though China has been developing autonomous driving over the past 2 years, things here are still in the early stage. German car makers join the effort to mean more experience and research will now be available to domestic car makers.
In terms of advancement of the regulation that we do see that Germany has developed a bit more earlier, so the OEMs has a bit more of the experience in terms of the autonomous driving testing. So that was just started in China a year ago, and the size and the scale is not really on par with the German counterparts.
And that means working with German firms will help ensure China achieves its autonomous driving targets. The National Development and Reform Commission's plan is that by 2020, intelligent cars will account for half of the country's new car production. Chen Tong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Let's look at the commodities market. Crude oil prices held mostly steady today on optimism that US-China trade tensions would ease and on hopes that major economies would enact stimulus measures to counter a possible global economic slowdown that could affect oil demand. A rally in the equity markets around the world and growing expectations that global economies would take action to counteract slowing growth also supported oil prices. Still ahead on the show. This former banker is making organic farming attractive to young people in Nigeria. And Uganda's food carts are going green and serving clean.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
One Nigerian farmer is redefining this sector in a bid to get younger and educated women to embrace the trade. In a country where most young people are swirling towards white-collar jobs, Amaka Chukudum left a thriving career in banking to pursue a lifetime passion in organic farming. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmas with the story of Chukudum, one of Nigeria's leading advocate for organic farming.
She is far from the typical image of a farmer in Nigeria. But Amaka Chukudum is a very serious and passionate one. A couple of years ago, she was sitting in a cozy office as a mid-level banking staff. But with a burning desire for farming, she transformed from sitting behind a desk to working full-time as a farmer.
My mother has been my hero. She taught me farming from the scratch. I watched my mom as a child, and she would go to school, teach us, and return home. We go back home after resting. We enter motor back to the farm. So that passion was built from childhood.
Today, Amaka is easily the most recognizable female farmer in Nigeria. Not only does she have her own farms in some parts of the country where she grows different cash crops, she runs a consultancy that manages farms for her clients. And this one, right in the heart of Lagos, is one of them.
When I look around me, I don't see unemployment. I see unemployed minds. Our minds is a real farm. Before you can be a good farmer, you must start farming from your heart. For every season, I decide what I want to farm.
Amaka is strictly into organic farming, believing it's the most healthy, and she's making good business out of it, exporting quite a number of her products. She also trains young people and women in the art of organic farming and how to make money from it.
It's about creativity. I tell every youth, you don't need to look for the government for anything. If there's anything we farmers need from government, it's not money. What we need is training. Government should set up training institutes where farmers should be properly trained, and industrialization. A lot of farmers are giving up today because they have a problem with their sales. And this problem is because after your harvest, no place to do the processing.
One way Amaka is working to get more young people to embrace farming is to change people's perception of modern-day farmers. She's quick to use herself as an example.
In fact, when I appear to teach women and they say she's a farmer, most of them don't believe it. They believe that a farmer has to look dirty, you have to look so unkempt. I tell them, no. I believe you can actually be classy and be a farmer.
With the Nigerian government concentrating heavily on agriculture as part of its diversification drive, young farmers like Amaka have become a strong reference point. It's therefore up to the government to leverage on farming projects like hers to drive its national agriculture campaign. But on her own, Amaka is gradually winning young people to her organic farming initiative. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
In Uganda, solar-powered food carts are supplying hungry Ugandans with clean Rolexes. That's a very popular type of street food in the East African nation. Terry Wangari has the story.
Food on the streets of Kampala may be cheap and tasty, but it's not entirely risk-free. 4 years ago, some socially minded entrepreneurs decided to try and change that by creating food carts equipped with solar panels and training vendors in good hygiene practices. The carts are called Musana, which means sunlight in the local Ugandan dialect. Street vendors usually work in shifts and continue on into the night to feed the night owls. Electricity is a problem for most, but not for these carts.
So the first thing that made a big difference was a light. A lot of Rolex vendors work 24 hours with different shifts, and it's very difficult for them to work at night. They either don't have access to power, or they're stealing power, or they have to be under somewhere that has power just so that they can see. And so by adding a solar-powered light, it gave them so much more ability to stay open longer and to make more money.
Now, there are 7 such carts in the capital selling Rolexes, which are a popular Ugandan street food. Vendors who've scrubbed their hands prepare the ingredients for the omelets studded with tomato, onion and other vegetables. They make chapatis on a hot pan before the two are rolled together to form a wrap in their Musana carts.
It's basically like a kitchen away from my home for us, the bachelors. So whenever I come from training basketball, it's the first place I go to. The guy has aromat, he has green pepper. He can even add for me some other flavors which I actually don't know, but they just taste nice.
The carts operate on a franchise system employing 3 to 6 vendors. Those who want to become a Musana cart vendor go through training in finance management, customer care, hygiene, and a host of other skills that will help them run their business. They then pay about $410, which gives them a solar-powered cart, an optional fridge, and an operating license from the city authority.
So they also have checklists and training of how they should do things, how often you should wash your hands, why you don't mix certain things on the same chopping board, and just many small health and safety standards to make sure that there's a much less likelihood of food poisoning with a Musana Rolex than a regular street food Rolex.
Life before Musana carts, I used not to make enough money. Like I couldn't even manage to pay some of my bills, like especially rent, because I used to do little sales, like not as I'm doing right now with Musana. Get many people come to me because with Musana, you have to be hygienic, yeah. And when you're hygienic, you attract a lot of people who comes to you and buy your sales, like your chapatis and Rolexes.
The carts are also promoting clean energy and reduced waste. So now, Ugandans can enjoy their local delicacies in a clean, hygienic space while protecting and safeguarding the environment. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
South Africa's Kruger National Park is famous for offering tourists the best wildlife experiences. Home to the Big Five and a range of other animal species, the park is a must-do bush adventure. Now, Sun Parks is taking that experience to another level, quite literally. The National Parks body is preparing to unveil a new and unique experience 60 feet above the Isabi River. Soon, visitors will be able to enjoy the sights of the park from the 5-star Kruger Shalati Train Hotel. CGTN Sumitra Naidu has the details.
South African tourism group Tebe has ambitious plans to create a world-class bucket list experience for local and international visitors.
It's been a dream of ours to create something unique, something exciting inside the Kruger, largely because as a business we try and bring in a market that doesn't travel to travel a bit more. And we think of a market that we refer to as the Afropolitans. And we've been looking for exciting opportunities. This came about at a time when we're really in the middle of doing some of those sort of initiatives. So it excited us that it stood out as a unique project.
Work is underway to get the carriages in shape. The hotel will be able to accommodate up to 48 guests. It will also boast a suspended pool, providing adventurous travellers with a bird's-eye view of the Big Five.
We've gone the whole hog and taken these old, effectively scrap. So we're in a recycling project in a way, which talks to our environmental responsibilities. But we've taken these old carriages, transported them up from Ladysmith, separated the substructure, the bogies, the wheels that connect to the rail, refurbished those so that the carriage is fundamentally sound as it stands on the tracks. But the interiors is where the majority of the work has gone, and the innovation.
So all of the train carriages are now being refurbished. Once this carriage is complete, it will have all of the amenities of a 5-star hotel room.
The train hotel will be stationary on the disused bridge.
In ensuring that it is usable, one of the first things that Sandparks did before they even offered up the concession was to ensure that it is structurally stable, and engineers' assessment was undertaken. The remarkable thing is that 110 odd years old, this bridge is in absolutely remarkable condition.
Meeting environmental standards has been a priority to ensure that the natural habitat of the Kruger is not disturbed. The project will also benefit local communities in Skukuza.
We have a percentage of that concession belonging to a community, which we gave to them for free. So they get a 10% free equity. So they become co-investors with us without putting in the cash up front, so which for us is exciting. And we also give those communities preferential employment where it is possible and they qualify to be able to provide services.
All work is on track thus far. The hotel is expected to be ready by December this year. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's look at the currencies now. The Kenyan shilling held steady against the dollar today due to thin hard currency demand from importers and some banks cutting their long dollar positions to meet the central bank's shilling reserve ratio requirements. The South Africa's rand, on the other hand, firmed, pulling back from an 11-month low as long dollar investors took some profits and awaited further clues on the outlook for the global and local economy. And with that, we come to the end of Global Business tonight. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platform. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.